introduce Judy. I'm going to introduce Judy. I've known Judy about a year, and we've had multiple conversations on a whole number of topics, primarily Medicare for All, and now the redistricting one. Judy is a native, but her roots, she says, are in the Windy City of Chicago, where the politics apparently got into her DNA. She says her grandfather was a ward captain. We don't have ward captains out here, but it sounds very, very important. Judy's a UCI graduate. She's a registered nurse. She worked at Mission Hospital for 32 years, and she worked for 50 years in Orange County on campaigns. I think that's probably how Melissa knows her so well. Judy is the president of Democrats of the Hemet San Jacinto Democratic Club, and she is an AD member of the Riverside County Central Committee. Judy is especially qualified to talk on the subject of redistricting, which is as important as any issue we could possibly talk about, because she has kind of devoted her attention for the last months and maybe longer on the topic of that. She's done something that I certainly didn't do, which is attend virtually all the meetings of the redistricting committee. And just about a week ago, the maps came out, which are, I guess, good news and bad news, depending upon your point of view. So Judy's going to talk about the redistricting process, how it affects Democrats and future elections. And the only thing I would add, which I'm sure Judy will stress as well, which is just because the maps came out does not mean the process is over. The maps are not final. So input is still possible, public input, and lines can be changed. Lines can be changed. So with that long-winded introduction of Judy, I give you Judy Rice, who's going to talk to our club about the redistricting.
Okay, basically, some of the thunder was taken by the newspapers because they suddenly discovered redistricting. So a lot of the same stuff I talk about is in the some of the articles. But what I'd like to talk about is, to a certain degree, some of the mindset of the commissioners, because I watch them sometimes from Northern California to Southern, and where 10 years ago they tried to keep counties together. Now they're realizing that needs of the people have changed, that like Northern California is most so concerned about all of the national parks and the watersheds and stuff like that, and how, because those districts are so small, their representation was cut up. So what they're trying to do is keep cities intact, communities intact, tribal lands intact, national parks intact, watersheds. That's why you'll see that the Salton Sea pretty much stays whole this whole time, where it was cut up before. But on the other hand, Joshua Tree gets cut up in some of the districts. So what I find interesting is that they're not cookie cuttered between assembly districts, congressional districts, and state senate. State senate and congressional and assembly districts have to dovetail. But the congressional district, while it sometimes follows, doesn't always. If you want to make me a co-host, I'll show you some of the draft maps. I think, let's see. I had, yeah. One of the things to see is to use the map viewer. When you go to the website, the map viewer isn't as pretty as the PDFs. Those are nice and colorful. But with the map viewer, you can zoom in even on your street address and be able to see where it is. And you can overlay present congressional maps and potential maps. And what I have found in the newspaper when they were talking about Raoul's district being 34 instead of 36, well, the commissioners don't use numbers at all. They're using city labels so that you know it's one part's Morongo, one part's Coachella. Then you know, so they can identify the areas differently. But when you see the and when you see it in
Judy,
the,
you are now a co-host if you want to put anything.
okay, let me see if I can share the screen here. Okay. Now, can you see the whiteboard? All right. Can you see that? Can you see the whiteboard? I mean, the map viewer? Ah, I got too many screens up. Let me turn it down and then come back up. Can you see it now? No. Well, I'm not going to waste time on it because you can go there. But it also brings up the voting, the CVAP, which is the citizens voting age population, which is what all of these things are geared at. When you look at the PDF maps, if the district is in yellow, it's a VRA district. Those are the ones they did first, because those are the ones to try and give the people who have Latinos, probably they're the biggest one. I don't think in LA County you can get some Asian Pacific Islander areas. But now for us, it's mostly Latino groups. So those are the ones, the big one we have that goes all the way up to Needles. There's a reason for that, because they're considering the Colorado River and all of the fights that we're going to have with water. So that's why that's that funny little continuation up to Needles, because Needles and Blythe are going to be worried about water. I know that a lot of you in the Coachella Valley are freaked out about cutting the valley up the way they have. But one of the things they were talking about was the tourist end of the valley versus the agricultural end. And they didn't want one overwhelmed by the other. Now you can still make the arguments that you want to about communities of interest. They are still taking that. In fact, today was another day that they were taking input. I found it harder to follow because they're all over the map. Anybody can talk about any area at this point. So you're never sure what they're talking about, but they can't comment. They're doing that until the 23rd. After the 23rd, when their business meetings, they're going to start giving direction to line drawers. So we have to be paying attention to those, because any changes they're going to make now will be close to being what's going to be written in ink, in stone. So these next couple of weeks when they're giving direction to line drawers, but you can go in on the Airtable and it's a small short form, but you can put your objections or what you like about them in there, and they are reading them. I will give these guys credit. I have never seen commissioners that you can't tell who's the Republican, who's the Democrat, who's got the agenda. You can't tell. And what I have found, when they come to the meeting, they have in the back of their mind, now, wait a minute, didn't we get communities of interest that said blah, blah, blah about this area? And they listen to people in LA talking about their community, neighborhood districts and how they were changed by police lines and stuff like that. That's why we need to be speaking up. I didn't hear anyone talking about Idlewild. Once in a while, there was a talk about Beaumont and Banning, but not much. Coachella Valley was talking for a goodly amount of time. And Commissioner Kennedy comes from Morongo Valley, so he's aware. The other thing is the topography. You're going to see a much more up and down kinds of district because they're caring which side of the mountain you're on, where the water table is, where the fire hazards are. Some of the districts that go from LA into San Bernardino County, they're actually looking at the mountain range and considering the foothills and how they change. So a lot of the arguments were about that. Out here, it's probably the western half of Riverside County that's going to get the most intense look, because some of those actually go into Orange County. Again, because of the Cleveland National Forest. But I don't think they're going to be sustainable because there's no good way to get from Western Riverside to Mission Viejo and Coto de Caza without going up and around rather than through the mountains. Also, the east side of Riverside County, they recognize as having more crossover voters. People like us who are willing to vote for people that don't look like us. Whereas Western Riverside, there are three things, and this is important with the Board of Supervisors redistricting. The jingles thing, and the third thing in the jingles is the polarized voters. So they're also considering that they can't stack these districts so there's too much of one side or the other. That's where sometimes you won't get the 51 or 52%, you might get 48 or 49%, but there's enough of a crossover vote, coalition voting. They're looking at that stuff in a broad sense, but never identify yourself as an elected official. I mean, it's in one ear and out the other as far as they're concerned. They want the community's input. If you know that there's a group of Vietnamese that live in a certain area, they will respect that as much as they can, especially out here, probably where we have more distance. They cut up Riverside and a lot of the in Moreno Valley sometimes because they're too big. The congressional districts have to pretty much be on target. And I had the numbers here. They're around 460 votes, 460,000 people, plus or minus 1%. The state, you can have a 5% gerrymander, differential. But again, when we get out here, because we have people, but a lot more space, it's hard to make them match properly. Like one is 20,000 over and another might be 5,000 under, but you have more play in there. What do I want to say that for the Coachella Valley, you might have more influence if you want to keep Cat City with Palm Desert and Palm Springs, is talking about the Agua Caliente Reservation, because it is such a hopscotch patchwork. You'd have more way of linking up that way. Thinking of those kinds, think of school districts.
Can I interject a question, please?
Sure.
Taking the projected maps as they now exist before any changes are made, is that good news or bad news for Democrats? And I'm going to put my question into context. I know from contact with Congressman Ruiz's office that they are concerned about cutting up what he views as the Latino vote, which is of course a strong part of his base. So how do these maps, is this good news or bad news for Democrats, or both?
I think it's both.
Uh-huh.
I think that Calvert might have a little more trouble because Palm Springs and the Valley would be theoretically in what the paper was considering his district, which goes from Norco, Corona to Palm Desert and Palm Springs, goes across. On the other hand, what they labeled Ruiz's district is going to be a powerful district because it'll have the Colorado River and the Salton Sea, but it's going to go down to the border. So I don't know whether he's going to have to fight Vargas in 51 or whether he'll move over, because that big yellow district, the Sika district, actually went to Chula Vista initially, but they cut it off at the San Diego Imperial border because neither San Diego nor Imperial Valley wanted anything to do with each other. It initially started out as a huge district to preserve the tribes. It had like 29 or 31 tribes in that area. But when they started talking to the tribal leaders, the Pala Indian spokesperson said, that's good, we want to keep our reservations intact, but we don't necessarily want to be with the other reservations. We want to be with our sphere of influence, like the city that's close to them. Like for me, Soboba is cut off from, and I think every district, from San Jacinto or Hemet or anything else, and yet we interact with them all the time. So I think, and I, like I said, that's the big district. I think it's going to be a fight because we're going to have to get people voting. And if you look at a lot of the districts, the Latinos may be a large number, but the voting age population of them is smaller. So for us as clubs, we need to look at them as potential. That's where our roots are going to be for the next 10 years. We have to bring, because basically what it's saying is those people are too young to vote, because the voting age population doesn't consider voting status.
Right.
It's your age only. So these are going to be people we're going to have to bring into the party and work with.
So I know that
Okay.
constitutionally, a lot of people don't realize this, but a congressional candidate is not required to live in the district in
Right.
which they're running. As a practical and political matter, that's a different story.
Yeah.
So in the situation like Congressman Ruiz's, does he get to select which of the new districts he wants to run in? Is that right?
I suspect he does, because the difference in this district is so minimal. I mean, it's probably a stone's throw away from where he lives right now.
Yes.
I suspect that'll be the case, and I think that's going to be probably what's going on in the back rooms of the executive board meeting right now. Because it's hard for me to know, because we really haven't had discussions like this about the party interest in these groups, in these districts. Now, in the Assembly District, Morongo Valley, Yucca Valley, 29 Palms is included in what would be AD 42. What looks to be the remains of that. But then they cut up Beaumont, I believe. And then they have this one that, it depends on which map you're looking at. And it's interesting how different the Assembly is than some of the congressional ones. But I will give them credit, because that CA8 used to go all the way up Inyo County and all that. It stops at San Bernardino. And from the look of it, the part of San Bernardino, they were always worried about LA influencing them and going Palmdale and getting lost in the LA market. It looks like they respected the San Bernardino western border much more. So there's something to be said. It depends on which district, whether it's a state Senate district. The state Senate district goes up and down. It's like going to Lake Arrowhead and all of this, rather than going to Temecula. In my own thing, the only thing I can say is that Hemet stays whole. We may not get East Hemet and Val Vista all the time, but this actual incorporated city hasn't been cut up, which is one little benefit for me. But I don't know how that fits in the thing, because I recognize that on paper, Hemet is a problem child. It has a history of polarized voting. So nobody really wants us, and I can't argue with them. So I kind of stay low. I don't always fight as much as I want to keep my area whole, because it could wind up being, a nasty little piece of business. So sometimes San Jacinto goes with Moreno Valley. Now they've cut up. Sometimes Riverside is kept whole and sometimes it's cut up again, because that's 300,000 people. It's hard to keep it whole because you've got the districts, but they try and respect school district boundaries and stuff like that too, or freeways. There's a lot of freeway cutting if you're on one side of the freeway or the other. So you have to pick your battles. But I think probably you guys are probably more aware of the strengths of the Democratic Party in the Valley than I am. See, that's part of my problem, is that I don't hear enough of what goes on in the Valley, because you've got your own newspaper and your own stuff. Ours are LA and nobody pays attention because it's too expensive.
Well, my perception is that the two ends of the valley, Palm Springs on one end and the Eastern Valley, Coachella and Indio, are stronger Democratic populations than Rancho Mirage, probably Palm Desert, and La Quinta, certainly Indian Wells.
So they kind of split those two,
Yes,
the strongholds. So that may actually make us, it might hurt a little bit on that huge district, but I think those cities, I think Indio is the biggest city in that congressional district almost, because it's all of, it's Salton Sea and all that stuff, but there isn't much, maybe when you get to, down by the border, but still in all. But it might actually make, like, breaking up Calvert's powerhouse better. But again, but then Beaumont and Banning could be winding up in what was CD 8, the old CD 8. So it's hard to tell, and that's why we're going to have to fight for them. So, I'm willing to take questions from people. I don't want to keep yapping.
if you have a question, please hit the raise your hand thing at the bottom, and I'll be glad to call on you, or if I miss you, just become vocal. Does anyone have any questions they want to talk or comments on the redistricting issue at all? It's really important. I'm looking here. I don't know if I can see raised hands.
Now, did what I put in the, oh, there, finally went in. I put those in earlier, but this is probably better now anyway. Those are links to the Board of Supervisors and to the maps I was talking about for the state.
So what is the timetable now in terms of finalizing the districts?
Pretty much by the 15th, they're gonna be, well, actually, it looks like around the 15th, they haven't pretty much, they're still taking public comments. Actually, this is after the 15th. No, the maps are now in. They've got 2 weeks for public comments to really change the maps. But I think they're going to be taking public comment pretty close to the end. There
a deadline, a legal deadline by when?
Yeah, by the 27th of December, they have to be finalized, and or early, I think the 23rd, and then we'll see the final ones by the 27th of December to go out to all the yeah.
Do the congressional redistricting, do they have to be approved by the US Congress, or is that purely a state by state?
It's state by state.
Okay, so
yeah.
So the clock is really ticking.
The clock is really ticking, and they really read the written input, so you don't have to feel like you have to twist your tongue, because when you call in, you're only gonna get maybe a minute and a half or two, at the most, you'll get 2 minutes. So you don't have much to say, but thank you, and then you're off.
All right, I see 3 hands.
Okay,
I see Patrick, Steve Brooks, and Karina. So let's do them in that order. Patrick, if you'd unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, I know Judy's an assembly district for California Democratic Party, and so am I. So I'm wondering, once they change the congressional districts, if it changes where we're at in the assembly districts for California, do you know how the CDP will deal with that? Will we
I
just
think-
wait out
I
our
think
term
it's
until the next election?
I think it's at the county level. I think it's our central committee that's gonna have to reassign us or grandfather us in. I'm not sure what they're gonna do. I think that's one of the things they're discussing themselves. Because I could be in what is now 80-60, I think, or 61. I think some of you it won't change. It'll still be 80-42 for Palm Springs and stuff like that. But I think I'd change. I don't know if Banning and Beaumont might change, depending on where they cut the lines there.
Do you remember what they're doing with DHS? Are they connecting that into a new area, or are they keeping it the same? Desert Hot Springs?
Desert Hot Springs is in that, it congressionally is in that big district. It's in the big I want to call it Sequoia, but it isn't Sequoia, but it's that huge district. Right now it's in there. But there have been, people that have been arguing about where Desert Hot Springs goes because they want to keep them together. So Banning and Beaumont wanted them. The desert wants them. Again, it's going to be the fights, but right now, in almost all of them, let's see if I can find it. I think I lost my link to them. State Senate district doesn't really, it's the assembly district that's going to determine. And I think Desert Hot Springs stays in the 42, what we would consider the 42. I don't think it moves out of there. Okay, no, it doesn't, because it goes up to Morongo Valley. So it will go up into 29 Palms. It goes as far as Fort Irwin. So,
You unmute and
okay, Steve, yeah.
Steve Brooks, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I was wondering if you want me to try to share these maps, because I think it's very confusing for people without seeing it in front of them. It's there.
If you can share the maps, that'd be good.
You have to give me the permission, but I'll give it a shot.
Okay. I will make you a co-host. There you go.
Okay, let's see. Okay. What do you want to start with? Assembly or Senate, or which one? Judy, which one?
Congress. Let's start with Congress.
Okay, let's see if you can see this one.
Yep.
Okay, so you want me to blow it up down
You can
on
go
the
to-
lower part? See.
Yeah.
Is that big enough or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That one district that goes north and south
That
is so
big
big, it
peak one?
takes up 2/3 of the eastern border of the state.
That's the big Sequoia one.
Yeah.
That's the, and I just think of it as kind of a power base. I can't see that staying that big. On the other hand, you see, because it cuts up 29 Palms, but Salton Sea is intact. So it's 6 of this, half a dozen of another. But you're going to have all the water along the eastern route. You've got the Salton Sea and the lithium battery issues. So, and you've got Joshua Tree National Monument and some of the little ones in between. You've got, about maybe half of the Indian tribes and tribal lands there. See, that's the other thing in Needles, there's a little tribe up there in the corner. So that also anchors it. They made it wider than they initially had it because they were, as Kennedy brought up, some of these little towns are basically spheres of influence for all these little census tract areas that show up but have no name, where people are congregated and stuff. Now, this is an overview.
How far over is that green come into the district there on the green on the
That's
left?
kind of, that's the Palm Springs to Norco. And then
So
it
that's
comes up
that's a separate congressional district.
as a separate congressional district. That's what the newspapers were claiming would be Calvert's district.
And it goes as far as Palm Springs and then stops going east, or?
Yeah, it stops around there and goes far west as Norco. So it skims over there. Temecula is back into a Riverside, northern San Diego County. This yellow one to the far right is that half Orange County, half northern San Diego County, because it's anchored by Pendleton, and that becomes that sphere of influence. But this yellow down on the bottom used to be part of the pink. It used to go all the way over there. So that's cut up, but then they've got stuff there. So again, you got to think of this, there's what, 470,000 people here. There's 470,000 people there. There's, then you get into Orange County and LA, and it's just, but there's the equal number of things. But as you can see, they've done a north-south orientation because they're capturing as many of the national parks and the mountain ranges as they can, so that when they're fighting fires, you're talking to the same congressional district.
Well, Karina, our elected official,
Yeah,
has her hand up. Karina, if you could unmute, and
yeah.
there you are. Hi.
How's everyone doing tonight? I just had a question in regards to more of a suggestion. When I was on one of the last sessions, and it did go pretty long, it was about an 8-hour call. I am sorry, my bird needs me to move to another room. She heard me talking and she decided she wanted to screech. So I do apologize, and I'll keep the video off and spare you the dizziness. When I was on that session for districting, like I said, it was about an 8-hour call. It did go very long, but there was a lot of folks that called in and had essentially a brief little script. And these were people that were from Paris, Moreno Valley, and Beaumont, Banning, and Desert Hot Springs that were all organized specifically to say, please help us keep the Black vote together. And so I was wondering if there's any effort by the group to maybe come up with a brief little script to encourage folks to call and make it easier, because when folks get up there and there's not a script, it's easy to get nervous and intimidated or forget what you were going to say because you were waiting so long. So I would encourage, if anyone from the group wants to come up with a few sentences and let people pick and choose a couple of them, so that when they call, they have a few concise, brief things to say that show support for the greater issues of keeping the valley together. And I can't oversimplify the need to specify that the Coachella Valley is interdependent. We're not just interconnected. We are interdependent. No one exists in a silo. We don't only live and shop and work in our own districts, in our own cities, our own zip codes. So it's imperative that we have access to make decisions that affect the whole region. And we cannot be separated from the Salton Sea, because too many things are at stake should that become another Owens Lake. We're already seeing the ecological impacts, and we must maintain the ability to have a vote in how those resources are allocated and how people are represented. So, it is going to be a long process. I dropped a link in there of how to sign up and how to give comment. You only have a little bit of time, but I encourage everyone to speak up, because we're going to be stuck with this for 10 years. We will be
Mhm.
stuck for better or for worse for 10 years, and a lot of things can happen. And there's a lot of federal funds up for grabs that we cannot afford to let slip through our fingers because we didn't get enough folks mobilized. So I encourage, again, if there's a couple bullet points or help people come up with a script to make it easier to participate. Thank you.
So Karina, I infer from your comments that you think it's in the interests of Democrats to keep the Coachella Valley in a single congressional district, yes?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
truly and wholeheartedly do. I think that looking at the surrounding areas and the needs, I think that we must keep it together. I think that when in the call that I participated on, there was a lot of folks from Murrieta and the more southern side of the mountain saying, nope, we don't want to be lumped in with the Coachella Valley. We have different ideological views, we have different agricultural views, we have different industries. So the communities that were part of Riverside County beyond San Jacinto, those communities are saying, nope, not it. Keep us with the rest of Riverside County, where a lot of the folks on the call were either advocating to keep the high desert connected because, again, of that same interdependence. You know, there's a lot of folks that work and live in the other region. So I think that we could find a way maybe to keep the high desert and low desert connected in one district and keep and the Salton Sea connected to the Coachella Valley in another district. I mean, we can't have our cake and eat it too every which way, but I think we cannot separate the Coachella Valley. I think I was speaker number 45 that time.
Mhm.
And I think there was like 78 calls that were on that one. And with the exception of 2 callers that referenced the Coachella Valley, every single person said, keep the Coachella Valley together. And I was very surprised by that. Only one person said, nope, cut off Desert Hot Springs, cut off Cathedral City. We don't want them in our district. It was a very us versus them kind of ideology that was expressed. And another person was speaking more in regards to wanting to ensure that the Imperial Valley's agriculture could join forces with Coachella Valley agriculture so that grower interests were protected. And that person
Commissioners, did the commissioners comment on the comments? I
the
mean, when you
commissioners
get to-
cannot comment. The commissioners
No.
cannot comment.
Okay, so it's all they can do is listen.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct, but
Okay.
I can tell you that I know a commissioner, and she's telling me that, you know, the toughest part is getting the word out, and I feel like I personally could be doing more, but I don't know how to clone every thought I have into a social media post or to a text. But I think that what I found most effective from being in on that very marathon call was that it was a lot easier when people could call and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm calling from the city, and I'm calling to protect the voter block for this reason, either saying because of geography, because of ethnic groups, because of industry. So I think that using the geographic boundaries of the Coachella Valley, we have a natural way to say we are bound by these mountains. We are bound by, it used to be a seasonal economy, but we need to really advocate for the strengths of already having the Coachella Valley Association of Governments. That already shows the very heavy commitment to working together and less of the carving up as other cities would have us believe. Having been someone who's lived in the Valley since 1984, I have seen the impact of the us versus them, the East versus West, the haves versus have-nots, whichever way you want to cut it, it kind of overlaps to the same areas. And I can tell you, having friends that grew up across the Valley and looking at their professional trajectories, it is in the benefit of everyone to stay together, because the concentration of resources, whether they are financial, is in one side, but the resource of labor is in another. And to continue to believe that they are not interdependent is completely foolish and would be really shooting ourselves in the foot.
I find the argument that you made about interdependence to be very strong, even stronger than geographic connections. I think the Coachella Valley is economically interdependent upon everyone within it. And
Exactly.
I find that to be a persuasive argument. It may be that some cities are close physically or geographically, but that doesn't mean they have a commonality of interest that another city may have when they're economically tied to the other city.
Gated communities should not be enough to consider yourself a community of interest. You know, a collection of HOAs, you know, highest condensation or per capita HOAs, that should not be a community of interest. And yet that's what we see over and over and over, because they organize, because they have the infrastructure for communication. And so for those of us that don't have that life, those resources, those networks, you know, it takes a little bit of extra work. So again, I implore, if folks want to drop into the chat a couple of the bullets of things that stick out the most. And I know that, you know, there's folks that do postcard campaigns. And so, you know, even if you don't want to do a postcard, have it be a text campaign, you know, text a friend, a loved one. If one thing that I found was very effective is if someone can craft that and just a simple copy and paste, right? You can hold your finger over it on your phone. It'll copy, hold your finger somewhere else, and it'll paste, and you can send that link off to folks and just have them email. Say you can copy this text into an email and just fill in, hi, my name is Chris from Hemet, and this is what I feel, and just copy paste email. Yes, Chris is the one that was on my screen, so I know your eyes are like, how do you know me? Sorry, Chris. He's just happily munching away. So, you know, however, just to make it super easy, because we know everyone feels passionate about it, but it's very easy to feel overwhelmed. And if you go and you try to sign up for comment, it wants you to make an account, it wants you to verify it, it wants you to sign up. And it's just a lot easier if we give folks the email address and say, fill in your name, pick a couple of these bullets, or just copy paste and send it off, because that's the easiest way to translate into action. And we have to remove whatever obstacles of interrupted thought. We task switch so much. We think we're multitasking, but we're just juggling between attention spans. And if we can make it super easy to just copy paste an email, copy paste a comment, whatever it is, but remove all of the barriers that can distract somebody from participating.
Chris, if you want to unmute and you got your hand up here,
Later, well.
go ahead. Chris, can you unmute? Maybe not.
There we
you
go.
go.
There we go.
There you go.
I wanted to point out that I think equally as important as direct public comment is writing into the commission. There are two ways that you can do that. And it allows you to make a longer statement, providing more of the rationale for your point of view. And I think, record those, and you can see those as posted on their website. So
Part of the Airtable.
that's a good way to do it too, if you don't get a chance to make a public comment or you're reticent to speak publicly. That's a good way to get your point of view into them.
And they do read them, and they do reference them.
I've heard them refer to them.
Or do both, talk and write. You can also talk. They're not mutually exclusive. You can do both.
Right.
Yes, sure.
Right. Okay. Judy, do you want to add anything? Everyone else has been talking.
Karina was right on target. Although sometimes you have to be careful about the script, because some of the people from, I think it was Ridgecrest, we're doing that kind of thing, but you could tell it was a political, not a community of interest. And you could tell that the commissioners, oh yeah, that's right, that was an organized group, but there was a little bit of realizing that we want to work with our supervisor, we want to work with these people. It's like, no, that's not their concern. It's up to us to get rid of the bad supervisors and the bad congressional people. They just want to make sure that these districts reflect the people that are in them. And they, you know, they're doing a cattywampus job, but I have to give them, I mean, I understand why they're pulled as 6 ways from Sunday. And in point of fact, the week before, I think it was the week of November 7th, was when they were finalizing these map things and trying to balance the population, because that's what took their most time, was balancing all these populations. Because when they were doing the visualizations, they were off like 8% on some of these assembly districts, which was way above what they were allowed to be. So that week, they were spending to try and just equalize all the assembly districts and all the congressional districts. And they knew that once the public saw them, they're going to be up in arms, and they expect, basically, they're expecting the communities of interest to tell them why they shouldn't be broken up or why, whatever. They're expecting feedback from us. They're actually hoping that we give them feedback so they can justify changing the areas, because some of them aren't happy with the areas themselves, but in deference to the needs to balance the populations, because that's the first consideration, is population. Then it's the Voting Rights Act. And those are the ones they do first. They get to the voting rights districts, whether it's assembly or state senate or congressional. And then they arrange the other districts around them. So that's why they know that no one's going to be happy, but they expect us to give them feedback, and that's going to help them. They want that feedback.
All right, well, thank you, Judy. This has been extremely useful and equally informative. So we've got just about 5 minutes left on our unofficial clock here. And I want to throw it open to the membership here. This is the general membership meeting. If anybody has anything they'd like to say or comment on or ask questions about, now is the time to do it. I think it's good that everybody, I'd love to hear from the members pretty much on any topic pertaining to our club. Does anybody have any suggestions, questions, comments, criticisms, anything like that? I see Chris and Steve. I hope they're not criticisms, but Mr. Brooks.
Well, I can put up the Assembly and the Senate district briefly if people want to just get a sense of what is there.
All right, that would be fine. That would be helpful
Okay, let me
if you're doing that.
see.
Chris, you can comment as well if you'd like.
All right, let me put a plug in for CalCare, AB 1400. That is moving along very quickly. They're expecting shortly after the first of the year to, I suppose, introduce that again to the state legislature. And there are some events that are going on. There are past postcards being sent out. There are meetings. There are phone banks. And so those of you that perhaps have worked with me in the past on CalCare or Medicare for All might join me again in increasing this effort to get CalCare back on the legislative agenda.
Chris, if CalCare passed and were law, how would that affect present Medicare recipients?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Fold it in.
Pulls them in?
Folds, believe it folds them in.
Yeah. It's not one of the exclusionary groups that I've heard about. So it probably would be inclusionary.
Okay.
It may be stepped in because it may be harder to get the feds to kick it over, but it's supposed to be phased in.
Well, it would be considerable funding for supporting CalCare. So it'd be all right with me if that happened.
Yeah.
Here's the Assembly. I'll switch to Senate here. Let's see.
And when you go on the site, you can see that they will do this one, but they will also break them down into the sections, and you can see them farther along. It's like 90 or 100 pages in some of them, but we're usually at the bottom. It's SoCal at the bottom of the maps. And I've printed some of them out for people, so you can see a better breakdown of the cities.
Karina, are you still here?
Yes.
If you could, if there are existing mini scripts like you described regarding keeping the valley together in a single district, if you could send me a couple sentences that I
I
know.
have not seen any. That's why I was asking if maybe anyone in this group that has already been working on that. I don't want to pop in and step on anyone's toes and with work that's already been done. But no, I have not
I was
seen
gonna
a
say, if
script.
I had something I could, we've got like over 500 people on our email blast list, and I could blast that out to them.
Well, I just put one little blurb into the chat box if that you want to build on that.
Right, okay, that's a good start. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Deborah Vogler, your hand's up.
Yes,
Please
yes,
unmute.
hi.
Hello.
I also put in the chat box the great work that the Coachella Valley Economic Partnership has been doing to make the CV's economy more resilient and more diversified. So for that reason alone, I mean, forget anything else. That to me is an important reason to keep Coachella Valley together. Why should we throw away all that hard work when you're breaking up, making artificial boundaries, if you will, between the different communities? So and the CVEP just had their summit online, and you can go to the website and play the video, and you will see it's really a great presentation on our economy, local economy. And I think that could give people a lot of ammunition, if you will, when they create or craft their messages to the commissioners.
That supports the economic interdependence that I
Yes.
was talking to Karina about. Yes, absolutely. Well, I'll certainly write something and send it in. I don't know if I have the patience to wait 8 hours on the phone, but
That's exactly why the email is a great way to go,
Right.
and it
Right.
makes it so much simpler.
Right. Does the bird want to comment?
Absolutely, all the time.
Yes, I know all about that too. All right, well, we're right at 3, and unless somebody has something really important they want to add, this has been another really good meeting, very informative, and what I like most about our meetings, Mr. Brooks, is the interactivity. Steve, did I leave something out?
Oh, I just as a informational, I went to the community forum on Lithium Valley Commission. The
Yeah,
commission is preparing a report to come out next year about lithium development. And there's a lot going on there. If people are interested in it, well, they can contact me and I'll try to loop them in.
that's an issue that's going to get bigger and bigger, isn't it?
Well, it's what people need to know is it's really very separate from the whole Salton Sea issue, although it could be, connected to it money-wise and so forth. But technically speaking, it's sort of a separate issue. So they're handling it separately. I think everyone that has communicated to the commission is very concerned about the air quality down there. And so really it ends up really needing to be united with the Salton Sea anyway. But, the whole development thing they're handling separately. So anyway, there's a whole lot that could be said. And so maybe we can organize something to get people more informed on it and maybe more involved in it.
All right, maybe we can have somebody come and speak to us someday soon about that.
And there are some presentations on the commission's website too, that we might be able to, show a video or, at least of what they're contemplating down there.
Karina, is that a new hand up or is that the old one still there?
That's a new hand.
Okay.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Steve mentioned with the lithium extraction and just a thought that I've had floating around is we hear all of the hype about how great lithium is going to be, but it's not recyclable and it doesn't break down the same. So I think that someone needs to be on the forefront of pressing those questions and saying, yes, it's great, but who's to say that, you know, in 6 years, science doesn't come up with something much better and now we're stuck with lithium that's, you know, being taken out and now airborne. And then on a lighter note, just for the golfers, the Riverside County Foundation on Aging is having a golf tournament on December 11th on the Saturday. So I'll have that info publicly on my social media if anyone is interested. So again, it's a countywide effort, but it's being done here at the Classic Club in Palm Desert. So again, just a little bit of love to the golfers.
Very much. And absent anything else from anybody, I'm going to pound the gavel and close the meeting. Thank you all very much. And please remember, December 11th at the Palm Desert Civic Center Park at noon. We'll have refreshments. We may have some other surprises, and we'll actually be there in person. So I hope to see all of you there. Thank you very much.
I'm back.
Hmm.